The email arrived at 11:47 p.m., sharp and cold, like a knock at the door no one wants to answer. Ethan Cole had been pacing his apartment, tie loosened, sleeves rolled, mind still spinning from a tense board meeting earlier that evening. When his laptop chimed, he almost ignored it. Almost something in his gut told him not to. He walked back to the desk slowly, the city lights outside his window reflecting against the dark screen. The subject line froze him in place. Board decision. Effective immediately. He clicked. Each word felt heavier than the last. The board had voted. Leadership change was necessary. Stability was required. Effective immediately. Daniel Mercer would assume the role of Chief Executive Officer. Ethan read it twice, then a third time. The company he built from nothing gone. From his hands in 4 paragraphs. He didn't shout. He didn't throw the laptop. The shock was too deep for noise. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling as if the answer might be written there. 15 years. 15 years of work, risk, sleepless nights, and relentless belief. Reduced to a corporate announcement. His phone buzzed. Message after message. Investors, friends, industry contacts. But one name didn't appear. Daniel, that silence screamed louder than anything else. Ethan stood and walked to the kitchen, pouring a glass of water he didn't drink. His reflection in the dark window looked unfamiliar, tired, confused, betrayed. Hours earlier, he had sat across from Daniel at the long conference table. They had argued, yes, but they had argued before, about growth, about risk, about the future. That was normal. That was business. But Daniel had looked calm. To calm. "You're pushing too hard," Daniel had said during the meeting, fingers folded neatly on the table. "The expansion plan is bold, but the company isn't ready." "It will never be ready if we keep playing safe," Ethan had fired back. Some board members had shifted uncomfortably. Others had nodded at Daniel. Ethan had noticed it, then the subtle alignment forming. He had assumed it was temporary. A debate. A difference in strategy. He hadn't realized it was a decision already made. Now the truth settled in like ice in his veins. Daniel hadn't just disagreed. He had organized. He had convinced. He had acted. Ethan grabbed his jacket and stepped. Outside, the cool night air hit his face, but it didn't clear his head. He walked without direction, hands in pockets. Memories flooding in faster than he could control them. He remembered the garage. The first office wasn't an office at all. It was Daniel's uncle's old auto garage, half cleared of rusted tools and oil stains. They had set up 2 folding tables and 1 secondhand computer. The roof leaked when it rained. The heater barely worked. But they had believed in something bigger than their circumstances. Daniel had been the cautious one, even then. Ethan, the dreamer. It balanced them. "Someday we'll laugh about this place," Daniel had said once, wiping grease off his hands while reviewing a business plan. Ethan had laughed. "We'll buy the whole block." They had shared everything: ideas, failures, victories. When investors rejected them, they motivated each other. When money ran low, they skipped paychecks together. When the first major client signed, they celebrated with cheap takeout and plastic cups of sparkling water because neither could afford champagne. That bond wasn't just business, it was brotherhood. Ethan stopped at a street corner and leaned against a cold brick wall. A car passed. Somewhere a siren echoed. The world moved normally, unaware that his had tilted. Why hadn't Daniel warned him? That question kept repeating. If Daniel believed the company was at risk, why not fight harder privately? Why go to the board? Why make it public? Why humiliate him? Unless Daniel believed Ethan wouldn't listen. The thought stung. Ethan replayed recent months in his mind. The aggressive expansion into new markets. The heavy investment in experimental technology. The push to outpace competitors. He had been relentless, convinced that slowing down meant losing. Daniel had asked for caution more than once. Growth is good. If we hesitate, someone else takes the lead. Ethan had replied without looking up from his screen. Had he dismissed him too quickly? The announcement was already live. A carefully written message praising Ethan's vision while welcoming Daniel's steady leadership. Comments flooded in, employees expressing shock. Others offering support to Daniel. Had they been afraid of him? Ethan shoved the phone back into his pocket and resumed walking. The anger began to rise, not explosive, but controlled. Focused. Daniel had orchestrated this. Quiet meetings, private conversations, persuasion behind closed doors. It wasn't spontaneous. It was planned, which meant while Ethan had been pushing forward publicly, it was past midnight. He didn't turn on the lights. He sat in the dark, hands clasped, staring at the faint glow of the skyline. His mind began to shift. Shock turned to analysis. Who voted against him? Keys which investors had been swayed. What arguments had Daniel used? Financial instability, risk exposure, leadership fatigue. Ethan knew the numbers. He knew the long-term projections showed massive upside, but short-term volatility had scared the board. Daniel had exploited that fear. A slow breath filled Ethan's lungs. If fear had been the weapon, clarity would be the counter. But beneath that strategic thinking, something deeper churned. Pain. A sense of personal violation. It was about being replaced by someone who once promised loyalty above all. He remembered the day they signed their first major contract. Daniel had pulled him aside afterward. No matter what happens, Daniel had said, gripping his shoulder, we never turn on each other. Deal, deal. Ethan had replied without hesitation. That memory now felt like a scene from another life. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Ethan stood and walked back to his desk. He opened a folder labeled Future. Inside were detailed plans, expansion maps, product launches, partnership ideas, the roadmap for the next 5 years, all of it now in Daniel's hands. Would Daniel follow through, or would he slow everything down? Would he dismantle Ethan's vision piece by piece under the excuse of stability? Tightened. His phone finally buzzed again. Daniel's name appeared. Ethan stared at it until it stopped. A minute later, a message followed. We need to talk. Ethan didn't respond. He wasn't ready to hear justification. Any explanation would feel like an excuse. Instead, he opened a blank document on his laptop. Not to write a resignation letter, to think. He typed one word at the top. Why? Below it, he began listing possibilities. Calculated theories. Financial caution. Pressure from major investors. Concern about leadership style. Personal ambition. He paused at the last one. Had Daniel always wanted full control? Ethan forced himself to be honest. Daniel had often deferred publicly, but behind closed doors, he had strong opinions. He had charisma. The board trusted him. Perhaps he had grown tired of being second in command. Ambition wasn't evil, but betrayal. To achieve it was something else. The sky outside began to lighten faintly. Ethan hadn't slept. His mind refused to slow. By dawn, one truth became clear. He could not accept this quietly, not out of ego, but because the narrative being shaped painted him as unstable, reckless. A visionary without restraint. That wasn't who he was. He had taken risks, yes, but calculated ones. Boldness built the company in the first place. If Daniel believed caution would save it, he was wrong, and Ethan intended to prove it. As sunlight filtered into the room, his phone buzzed. Again. News outlets requesting statements. Industry analysts speculating about internal conflict. Ethan stood straighter. If Daniel had chosen to act behind his back, Ethan would not respond with chaos. He would respond with precision. The desire for revenge didn't arrive as fire, it arrived as resolve. He would not lash out publicly. He would not vent on social media. He would not beg the board to reconsider. He would watch. He would wait. He would learn exactly how this decision was made. And when the right moment came, he would make his move, not to destroy the company, but to reclaim his place. As he finally sat down again, exhaustion crept into his bones, yet beneath it something steady anchored him. Betrayal had cracked his world in half, but it had also sharpened his focus. Daniel thought this was the end of Ethan's leadership. He was wrong. This was only the beginning. Ethan did not disappear after the announcement. He became quiet. There was a difference. Publicly, he issued a short, calm statement thanking the board for the opportunity to lead and expressing confidence in the company's future. Privately, he began studying every move Daniel made. Kay tracked investor reactions, employee morale, market shifts. Kay listened more than he spoke. Silence became his strategy. At first, anger fueled him. He woke up each morning with the same tight feeling. In his chest, the image of Daniel standing at the head of the boardroom table replayed in his mind. The calm tone, the steady posture. As if removing a co-founder was just another agenda item. Ethan told himself he wasn't hurt, just focused. But late at night, when the city was quiet, the truth pressed in. He felt replaced, erased. He requested access to his shareholder reports and began reviewing internal updates. Daniel had already slowed to major expansion projects. Hiring was frozen. Marketing budgets were cut. Analysts praised the disciplined leadership shift. The stock stabilized. Ethan hated that word. Stability meant small steps. Small steps meant lost opportunity. Yet part of him noticed something uncomfortable. The market responded positively. Investors who had once questioned volatility were calmer now. Was Daniel right? The thought annoyed him, but he couldn't ignore it. He replayed their last private argument in his head. "We can't sprint forever," Daniel had said. "People are burning out." "That's what growth requires," Ethan had answered. "You're not listening." Maybe he hadn't. Ethan pushed the doubt aside. Even if Daniel believed he was protecting the company, he had done it in secret. That was the line Ethan couldn't cross in his mind. Disagreement was normal. Organizing a leadership removal without direct confrontation felt personal. So Ethan began planning not recklessly, but carefully. He scheduled quiet meetings with 2 board members who had previously supported him. Not to complain, to ask questions. "What changed?" he asked calmly. "Over coffee with one of them?" The board member hesitated. "Concerns about sustainability." "Some felt you weren't open to adjustment." Ethan absorbed that without reacting. And Daniel? He presented a clear alternative. That meant preparation, slides, projections, conversations. Behind closed doors, Ethan realized something important. Daniel hadn't acted impulsively. He had built a case. That meant Ethan could dismantle it if he found the cracks. He returned to his apartment and reopened his long-term growth models. The numbers were strong but aggressive. High investment, delayed payoff. Risk in the short term. Daniel had highlighted that risk. But Ethan saw something else now. If framed differently, the same data could show controlled opportunity instead of danger. Revenge shifted shape in his mind. It wasn't about humiliation, it was about exposure. If he could demonstrate that Daniel's caution would cost the company its competitive edge, the board might reconsider leadership, but every plan came with a cost. If he publicly challenged Daniel, employees would divide into camps. Loyalty would split. Culture would fracture. Years of shared trust would collapse under suspicion. Was that worth winning? Some nights, Ethan convinced himself it was. He imagined the board reversing the decision. Daniel stepping aside. The company restored to his control. The satisfaction felt powerful. Other nights, doubt returned. He remembered the early garage days again. Daniel sleeping on the floor after long coding sessions. Daniel defending him in front of skeptical investors. Daniel celebrating small wins like they were world championships. People were not simple villains. They made choices based on fear, ambition, pressure. Maybe Daniel believed Ethan was driving the company toward collapse. Maybe removing him felt like saving it. That possibility complicated revenge. Still, Ethan continued building leverage. He gathered updated projections from independent analysts. He contacted a potential partner Daniel had declined and learned they were now negotiating with a competitor. That information mattered. It proved that playing safe had consequences too. He compiled everything into a clean, organized presentation. No emotion, just facts. A quiet counter-argument. Weeks passed. Pressure on Daniel increased. Being CEO was heavier than it looked. Employees questioned new restrictions. Some innovation teams felt constrained. Market growth slowed slightly. Nothing dramatic, but enough to create tension. Ethan saw the opening. A quarterly review meeting approached. As a major shareholder, he had the right to attend. He requested time to present additional insights. The board agreed. The night before the meeting, Ethan sat alone at his desk, staring at the final slide of his presentation. It was strong, balanced. It showed that Daniel's strategy reduced risk but also reduced potential. It showed that boldness, when structured properly, could win. All he had to do was present it aggressively. Highlight Daniel's miscalculations. Emphasize missed opportunities. Push for a leadership reconsideration. His hand hovered over the laptop as he adjusted. The final wording. This was the moment he had been building toward. But as he read through the slides again, something shifted. He noticed the tone. It felt sharp, competitive. It's designed not just to inform, but to undermine. Was he trying to protect the company or punish Daniel? The line between justice and revenge blurred. He leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. If he succeeded, Daniel would feel what he felt that night at 11:47 p.m. shock, humiliation, betrayal. The cycle would repeat, and then what? Would trust ever exist again? Would leadership become a battlefield instead of a partnership? Ethan opened his eyes slowly. He realized the board meeting wasn't just about strategy. It was about who he would become next. The desire for payback still burned inside him. It was real. It was justified in his mind. But so was the weight of consequence. Tomorrow, he would stand in that room again. Not just as a removed CEO, but as a man deciding whether revenge would define him more, whether he could redefine himself instead.